Welcome to Photos and Travel, a show that introduces you to fascinating places around the world. Please welcome our host and tour guide, Jonathan Van Bilsen.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Photos and Travel, where we bring the world to your doorstep. Today we're going to visit Estonia, the northernmost Baltic country located on the Gulf of Finland. We'll spend most of our time in Tallinn, the capital, which lies directly across from Finland and has very close ties with Stockholm and Helsinki. It is the country's cultural hub and has retained its walled, cobblestoned old town, which is home to cafes and shops, as well as a 15th century defensive tower. We'll begin our adventure right after these messages.
Thinking apparel such as hats, shirts, jackets, and more? At PP Print, we can help with so much to offer. Just ask, we've got you covered. PP Print, where experience pays off.
Pet Value has a fleet of services to help you and your pet live your very best lives. Visit Pet Value Port Perry for all of your pet's needs. Pet Value, your pet, your store.
Estonia has had 2 centuries of Tsarist Russian rule, along with 50 years of Soviet Union oppression, which has blended a Russian flavor into the culture. The country was first dominated by Sweden and then Russia, with a short-lived independence after World War I. In 1940, it was overrun by the Soviet Union. However, after the fall of communism, Estonia gained freedom and in 2004 joined the European Union. I entered Estonia by driving across the border from Latvia and made my way along the Gulf of Finland to the capital city of Tallinn. It lies a short 80 kilometers or 50 miles directly across the Gulf from the Finnish city of Helsinki. Unfortunately, many laborers have left Estonia for better opportunities in the neighboring Scandinavian country, causing issues for the Estonian economy. I met my guide Stanislav, who spoke fluent English and was very knowledgeable about his homeland. Tallinn, with a population of 437,000, is now prospering, and I was pleasantly surprised at how wonderful the region is. I don't usually talk about hotels when I travel, but I have to mention the Hotel Telegraaf, located 50 steps from the old town and quite a landmark itself. Once you get past the bright red rooms, you'll see the charm of this 150-year-old former private residence, which has a fantastic dining room and delicious cuisine. Of course, my first stop in Tallinn was the Old Town, which is divided into a lower and upper section. In days gone by, these were 2 separate feuding medieval towns, Toompea and Vanalin. The upper town, Toompea, includes the aptly named Toompea Castle. The lower town, Vanalin, has narrow alleyways, the town square, shops and restaurants. The city boasts fully intact medieval walls surrounding its wonderfully preserved Old World ambience. Of all the cities in Northern Europe, none are as well preserved as Tallinn. St. Catherine's Monastery is one of the oldest buildings in Tallinn and is located in the heart of the Old Town district, full of warehouses and merchants' houses. The monastery was built in 1256, but during the Reformation in 1524, it was destroyed and only a few fragments remain today. Dominicans, originally known as Dominicanas, are considered the watchdogs of the church, and consequently this carving of a dog above the entrance still remains. People first inhabited the area around Tallinn 5,000 years ago, making it one of the oldest cities in Northern Europe. Throughout the years, many different nations controlled the city and added some of their culture's most iconic attributes. Today, it is an example of a perfect mix of rich culture, stunning nature, and breathtaking architecture. Tallinn claims that they erected the world's first Christmas tree in 1441. The whole city is proud of this achievement, and every year during Christmas season, the streets of Old Town are decorated with the most colorful lights and garlands, which creates a festive atmosphere and attracts guests from all over the world. Of course, Riga in Latvia makes a similar claim, stating the first Christmas tree came from there. Whoever is correct, the traditions in this area are very strong. The lower town was the Hanseatic League Trading Center, and the old Hansa House restaurant is an exact replication, whisking visitors back to the 15th century. Sopris is a cinema in the old town and was built during the Soviet era in 1955. It is still in use today. Our next stop in the beautiful old town of Tallinn is the Cathedral of St. Peter and Paul. The local Roman Catholic parish built the church in 1844, and the neoclassical facade with two stumpy towers were added in 1924. The chapel seen here is one of two original rooms from St. Catherine's Cathedral, which was closed during the Reformation of 1524. It is said the artwork in the church was supposedly a gift from Bavarian King Ludwig I and dates back to 1600. Many of the houses in the old town have courtyards, which have been converted into restaurants by the owners. The fact that they're frequented by locals and tourists alike is a sign of Tallinn's prosperity. The decor is often quaint and personal, but certainly gives patrons something to talk about. Following along a small passage, we reach the Town Hall Square, one of the best preserved medieval town squares in the world. It was a marketplace in the Middle Ages, and many of the colorful buildings on the square were once medieval merchants' homes, offices, and warehouses from the Hanseatic Golden Age. The imposing town hall, built in 1404, sits prominently on the square and is the oldest in the Baltic and Scandinavian regions. During the summer months, the restaurants around the square set up their umbrella patios, where you can enjoy lunch and a cool beverage as you watch locals and tourists mill about. The first of two mandatory stops in Old Tallinn is the Apothecary Shop, alleged to be the oldest in the world. It dates back to 1422 and is certainly the world's oldest pharmacy in continuous use. Inside is a museum where you can see some of the old-time medicines and potions, and you can test various herbal tea blends picked from local fields. We continue along the square area and make our way past the Great Guild House used by merchants and artisans from at least the 14th century until 1920. The square is spectacular, but it can be touristy, especially in the afternoon when cruise passengers swarm the city. Wandering through the cobblestone streets and alleyways surrounding the center to find restaurants and cafes where the locals frequent is much quieter and is like taking a time machine back into the medieval ages. You'll find interesting little shops and restaurants at every turn, as well as very friendly merchants. And who knows, you might even find a hidden art gallery or two. The figure of an old warrior called Old Thomas was put on top of the spire of Tallinn Town Hall in 1530 and is one of the guardians of the city. The second mandatory stop around the square is the Maiasmokk Café, established in 1864. It is the oldest in the city and is famous for its marzipan, which is said to have originated in Tallinn. Marzipan is made from almonds and either sugar or honey. The cafe's marzipan room details the city's history of making marzipan in century-old traditions, maintaining the exact methods handed down through generations. Traditional marzipan figures made from special molds are for sale, and the question is not which one, but how many. The cafe itself has not changed much, and its famous tea wheel is well known throughout the region. Strolling through the old town square is relaxing and interesting. It is a great place to enjoy a coffee and a pastry or have dinner in one of the many fine restaurants. The lower and upper towns are connected by two passages called the Long Leg and the Short Leg. You'll find artists en route showcasing some great treasures of Tallinn. Walking up to Toompea, the upper town, can be a bit strenuous as the incline is steep and the ground is uneven. There are also stairs to make it easier. Once you get to the top, though, it's well worth the effort. There are many shops and cafes and interesting sights. I even saw kids moving furniture, which wore me out just watching. The upper town features some of Tallinn's oldest architectural wonders, including churches, a castle, and the residence of the Estonian president. The city started building protective walls in the 13th century, and over time, it was enlarged to a defense system of over 2 kilometers with gates and towers. Much of these structures survive today, including 20 of the pointed red roof towers. In some areas, it's possible to walk along the walls, and the views are amazing. The first wall around Tallinn was ordered to be constructed by Margaret Samburia in 1265, and for that reason it's known as Margaret Wall. Margaret Samburia was Queen of Denmark and the reigning fief holder of Danish Estonia in the 1200s. This part of the wall was less than 5 meters or 16 feet tall and about 1.5 meters or 5 feet thick at its base, but it was enlarged in the 14th century and citizens of Tallinn were required to turn out for guard duty, which meant they had to wear their armor and demonstrate their readiness to face off invaders. The walls around the old city are one of the reasons that Tallinn's old town became a World Heritage Site. Wandering along the narrow streets next to the wall is enjoyable, especially as there are so many unique things to see, such as St. Mary's Cathedral, built by the Danes in the 13th century. It is known as Toompea and is Estonia's oldest church. Originally a Roman Catholic cathedral, it became Lutheran in the mid-16th century, and it's the seat of Tallinn's Archbishop of the Estonian Evangelical Lutheran Church. Although St. Mary's endured severe damage in the Great Fire of 1684, it was the only building on the upper town left standing. It was restored to its previous state shortly after the fire, and a new Baroque spire was added in the 18th century. The beautiful organ was made in 1914, and it's used regularly. Walking around the upper and lower towns of Tallinn certainly makes you appreciate history, and there's no shortage of it in this medieval city. I enjoyed walking along the wall and sampling some delicious marzipan. I had dinner in the old Hansa house and found it to be quite entertaining. The word Hansa comes from the German word for old tribe, and the staff certainly does whatever it takes to pay homage to the customs of yesteryear. After these messages, we'll continue our trek through Tallinn's old town and venture outside of the city to explore some unique sights and even climb inside an old Soviet submarine.
Hello, I'm Terry Voss from Voss Independent Grocer. It's been a year since the pandemic started. I want to take this opportunity to sincerely thank all of our customers for their understanding, their loyalty, and their friendliness. I will admit it's been a trying time, but we have come this far only because of you, our valued friends.
Welcome back. You may notice some unique streetlights behind me which are all part of Tallinn's charm. You'll need several days to fully explore both the upper and lower old towns of this city. And if you have extra time, there are several areas which I found quite interesting. Before we venture outside of the city, we have to explore the Presidential Palace and the famous castle in the upper old town, as well as say hello to Old Herman. We're also going to tour a massive cathedral which looks down on the Presidential Palace. It was built by the Russians as a symbol of their dominance over the country of Estonia. Rising above the skyline of Estonia, the striking Alexander Nevsky Cathedral was built in 1900 in Russian Revival style, when Estonia was part of the Russian Empire. It is Tallinn's largest Orthodox cupola cathedral and is dedicated to the Prince of Novgorod, Alexander Nevsky, who led the famous Battle of the Ice at Lake Peipsi in 1242, which halted the German Crusaders' eastward advance. It was deliberately placed in this prominent location right in front of Toompea Castle, on the same spot where a statue of Martin Luther had previously stood to show the mainly Lutheran locals the Russians were in charge. During the Soviet period, the church came into decline due to communist non-religious policies. Since 1991, however, the church has been meticulously restored, even though it is a constant reminder of Russia's influence, power, and oppression over Estonia through the ages. There were actually plans to demolish the structure in 1924, but it was spared due to the lack of funds needed to raise such a large building. Today, the church is one of Tallinn's most visited attractions, and it's unique due to its contrasting architectural style. Now with the controversy long since faded, what's left is simply an architectural masterpiece. Designed by a respected St. Petersburg architect, the church is richly decorated. The interior is filled with mosaics and icons, and it's certainly well worth a visit. My next stop was the Toompea Castle, high above the lower town on an ancient stronghold site that dates back to the wooden fortress in the 9th century. Once a castle of ancient Estonia, it was renovated by the Holy Roman Empire's Teutonic Order, who added defense towers, the most famous of which is named Peak Hermann, or Tall Hermann. During the 16th century, when Estonia became a part of Sweden, they changed the castle from a crusader's fortress to a symbol of political power. The Presidential Palace was built as part of the Toompea Castle in 1937 as the residence of the Estonian president. Sadly, it only lasted for 3 years until the Soviets took over Estonia. Since independence, though, in 1991, the palace is again the home of the president. So unfortunately, it's not open to the public, but you can take as many photos as you like, and you can peer through the gates at the honor guards out front. Before you leave the upper old town, take a short walk to Toompea Hill. There is a stone wall at one end of the platform with amazing panoramic views of Tallinn. You can see the white tower of St. Olaf's Church, among medieval towers with the harbour and sea in the distance, as well as the rooftops and spires of the lower town. With the skyscrapers of the city in the distance, it is quite a contrast of architecture, from medieval structures to modern steel and glass. The new city of Tallinn is a thriving metropolis. The cluster of glass-walled skyscrapers around Makri Street near the Stockmann Shopping Center may at first glance appear to be the center of Tallinn, but the true heart is the Freedom Square. Situated on the edge of the old town, it has been the backdrop of many major historical events. Today, Tallinners and visitors alike enjoy meeting there with the smooth sound of St. John's church bells ringing in the background. The best theaters, cinemas, and concert halls are located in the city center, and flourishing natural areas are also not far. The Port of Tallinn is the biggest port authority in Estonia and is one of the largest port enterprises on the Baltic Sea. Regular lines serve routes to Helsinki in Finland, Stockholm in Sweden, and St. Petersburg in Russia. A trip to neighboring Helsinki takes about 2.5 hours by ferry. This is Padari Prison, a huge complex that can be visited in the summer months. Once an artillery battery in the 19th century, it became a prison from 1919 to 2002. At its peak during the occupation in World War II, there were close to 5,000 prisoners, which is 5 times more than its capacity. Located near the train station in a former industrial complex is the Telliskivi Creative City. It is the largest and most unique creative center in Estonia, with hundreds of creative companies, NGOs, and startups located here. During the Soviet era, this area was used for repairing trains, and it lay in ruins until 2007, when a flea market popped up. Since then, award-winning and diverse eateries, a shopping street focused on Estonian design, a gallery, and 3 theaters are located here for your leisure pleasure. Nearly 500 cultural events take place in Telliskivi Creative City every year, and a flea market takes place every Saturday. In the heart of the Creative City, you'll find the internationally renowned and modern photography museum. There is also a magnificent graffiti wall created by artists of 12 different nationalities. You can take a street art tour to learn more about art and the culture of Estonia. My next stop was the Seaplane Harbour, part of the Estonian Maritime Museum, founded on the initiative of former captains and sailors in 1935. Its main exhibition is located in the 500-year-old Fat Margaret Tower in Tallinn's Old Town, but in May of 2012, the Seaplane Harbour exhibition opened here. The Seaplane Harbour, including the Seaplane Hangar, was built to become part of Peter the Great's naval fortress 100 years ago on orders from the Russian Emperor Nicholas II. Before you enter the naval-looking building, you can experience old ships anchored in the harbour and even go on board. There are about 200 authentic items on display, including a century-old icebreaker. There are a variety of submarines sitting on the grounds, including this tiny wooden one, dating back to 1854. I'm not sure how long I could stand being inside that tiny vessel. When you think of submarines, the US, Russia, and maybe China come to mind, but probably not Estonia. Crammed between Germany and Russia, and bordering a body of water with a pivotal history, Estonia has been operating submarines for a very long time. The architecture of the hangar is remarkable, featuring the world's first columnless, thin-shell concrete domes of such volume. The building was used for seaplanes until the Second World War. The Seaplane hangar is one of the most valuable buildings of the 20th century in the Baltic states. A Danish engineering and construction company designed the hangars that were built in 1917. This is the first known steel concrete shell construction of this size in the world, and it's an amazing 36 by 116 meters or 120 by nearly 400 feet. Today, the Seaplane hangars accommodate dozens of exhibits, including submarines. The Lembit submarine was built in 1937 by the British Vickers Armstrong shipyard and served in the Estonian and Soviet navies. Until she was hauled out of the water in 2011, Lembit was the oldest submarine still afloat in the world. It was pretty amazing to walk around the inside of an old submarine and experience life as the sailors did nearly a century ago. Even the bathrooms in this massive complex have a nautical theme. Looking more like an abandoned cruise ship than a hotel, the Soviet Olympic Village certainly poses some intriguing questions regarding its structural integrity. Back in 1980, in preparation for the Olympics, landlocked Moscow had a small problem facilitating the sailing event, so it was decided to host it in Tallinn. The decision to hold the sailing disciplines in Tallinn was made in 1974. The competition was won by a group of young architects who had just graduated from the Estonian Academy of Art. The structure was commissioned by the Soviet Union in part to show the world their mastery over concrete pouring. In addition to its massive 5,000-seat amphitheater, it includes an ice hall, a small seaport, and a heliport. The ice hall closed in 2009 and the concert hall in 2010. Every Estonian was able to work on preparations for the Olympics. Schoolgirls were assigned to clean windows and wore their finest clothes, as it was, after all, an opportunity to visit the capital. In protest of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, 66 invited countries did not participate in the Olympic Games, most notably the US. Our final stop in Estonia is beautiful Kadriorg Palace, commissioned by Peter the Great and dedicated to his wife Catherine. It was built in 1718, and it's a throwback to the time when Estonia was ruled by the Russian Tsars. The palace, designed by Italian architect Nikolai Maschetti, with its magnificent main hall, is one of the most beautiful examples of Baroque architecture in Estonia and in Northern Europe. While visiting, make sure you don't miss the decadent two-story main hall with its elaborately painted ceiling and stucco work, or the room used as an office by Estonia's head of state before the nearby presidential palace was built. The palace houses the Kadriorg Art Museum, which exhibits the Estonian Art Museum's collection of foreign, Western European, and Russian art from the 16th to the 20th century. The gardens are now a public park and are an opportunity for locals and tourists to stroll amid fountains, hedges, sculptures, and flower beds, all modeled on Versailles. And that ends our visit to Estonia and the beautiful city of Tallinn. If you have an opportunity to visit, make it for several days, as there's so much to explore in this historic city. Perhaps tie it in with a visit to Helsinki across the Gulf of Finland, or even with a popular Baltic cruise. However you get here, once you arrive, I know you'll want to stay forever. For photosNtravel, I'm Jonathan Van Bilsen. It's been my pleasure to be your tour guide today, and I look forward to seeing you next time. If you like this program, please click subscribe and you'll never miss an episode.
Want to know what's happening in Skugog? News and lifestyle, changes in business, and all the entertainment information you'll ever need. Plus, each edition has a new photosNtravel article. Look for your next copy in your mailbox.
At thestandardnewspaper.ca, we try to show you the lighter side of our community workers and shed some light into their work in our community. With human interest stories on how the community gives back and reporting on legislation which affect us all, the Standard News is raising the standard in your community.